Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of the moral reasoning or justification behind going to war. Now, this is, if a country gets invaded and fights back, that's a difference to proactively seeking war on behalf of, say, a third party. Now, the moral reasoning behind war is we're only helping the oppressed. That little country there. We're just defending freedom, and all sorts of bellicose moral reasoning justifications are thundered out from the politician's pulpit. But the reality is mostly very different. And alliances can switch and change back and forth very quickly depending on the interests of the state. Now, Prime Minister Palmerston of Great Britain said that Britain doesn't have friends or allies or alliances; it has interests. So the needs of the state, if you like, in terms of their interests or their investments or the power dynamic of a region or something, that's what dictates what Britain does. And this idea of moral reasoning, Palmerston effectively admitted, has nothing to do with anything. It's the real politic of what's going on around us that decides what we do and don't do in terms of military campaigns and exercising and projecting of power. So that's probably one of the more honest politicians. You also saw statements, not dissimilar from, say, Julius Caesar and other people throughout history that have been influential in this area, that they come out with the same sort of real politic assessment of things, even Pericles in ancient Athens and so on. Now, when we look at all the major wars that have been fought, so Britain and France were really in a state of virtual civil war, ending really in the Napoleonic Wars. So say from even earlier than this, but certainly from the 1600s to the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and again even going back earlier, Britain and France were locked in this form of sort of virtual civil war. But it was a life and death struggle with Napoleon, or even Louis XIV for that matter. But after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, 40 years afterwards, Britain and France were allies fighting together alongside each other against Russia to support Turkey. 50 years after that, Turkey was then a mortal enemy of Britain and France, and then all the alliances switched the other way around. So it shows that alliances can shift back and forth, again, depending on the interests and the real politic of the moment. Now, say in the case of the state of Belgium was created to deny the seaports to France, because Belgium was primarily, or certainly the southern 2/3 of it was French speaking, but the English wanted this, and the treaties after the Napoleonic Wars, or even before that, insisted that Belgium had to be a neutral country, which would deny those seaports of the French. Now, in the days of ships being operated by wind and tides, those ports were deemed as among the more dangerous. It could choke off the English Channel and that sort of thing. But when steamships and newer technology vessels where wind wasn't an issue, tides weren't, or much less of an issue, then the neutral Belgium was largely irrelevant due to changing technology, but it had been important, again, in the days of a ship powered by sails and wind. So when World War I came along, Britain's justification was, well, we're only going to war because of Belgium. Belgium's neutrality was compromised. Little Belgium being put upon. We're fighting. We're fighting the bullies. We're fighting back. And it was that sort of rhetoric that was used. And we're morally required to go to the defence of this little state that we guarantee because they're being bullied and so on. Now, the reality, of course, was quite different. Germany, after it had integrated as a nation in the 1870s, it had grown economically very quickly and in the most advanced technologies of the day, electronics and chemicals and so on. So Germany was now a very populous nation, getting on for double the population of Britain, and was technologically advanced. It was very well organized. It was, lots of railway track. It was economically very dominant in Central Europe. It was surpassing the French in their economic penetration of the rest of Europe. Britain too, a lot of Britain's trade that hitherto had been relied on was being lost to Germany. So the British were very nervous about the influence and the power Germany had. And the British policy since even before the 7 Years' War in the 1750s had been to ensure a balance of power in Europe, not simply military power, although that, but also economic power, because British finished goods, again, the Industrial Revolution, Britain's manufacturing base, they were selling, not all, but huge amounts of their manufactured goods were being sold into Europe, all over Europe, Russia and all over the place. And they were losing ground here quite quickly to Germany. And this was a bit of a problem. And so a war was a way of restoring the balance, as the British statesmen would have seen it. Now, the British statesmen were looking through the geopolitical telescope of a previous era. Their attitudes were no longer relevant in the world of 1914, but they didn't see it that way, and they thought, well, if we can bring Germany down a peg or two, then we'll restore this balance that we dream of and have dreamed of for 150 plus years, and that's all for the better. So they went to war using the pretext of Belgium's neutrality. Now, the British had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality, so the German government could not have been unaware of the potential effects of going through Belgium. But nonetheless, so that was the trigger that brought Britain into the war. But Britain had already guaranteed the integrity of France. So the idea that it was very difficult for the British government to say, well, look, we're going to go to war to protect the French. People would go, what? What are you talking about? That's crazy. But by using Belgium, little Belgium, plucky little Belgium, we're going to stop those bullies and so on. So that did work as a moralizing talking point, and that was it. But the real purpose was to bring Germany down to size. Now, the view was that the combined might of Russia, Britain, and France that formed that alliance would, Germany would be defeated within a matter of weeks, and easily so. The Russian steamroller coming in from the east, and Britain and France, the two advanced economies with the French army was considered to be of the first rate, and the British Navy would control the Channel and blockade. They would win easily. And they were quite surprised that nothing of the sort occurred. That in reality they escaped defeat by a whisker in 1914, and again in early 1918 they came within a whisker of defeat again. And it was quite a shock to realise just how powerful technically and technologically and militarily and organisationally Germany was. Now, the Second World War was really played out for more or less the same thing. Germany had been divided into two. So Prussia had been divided off from Germany by what was called the Polish Corridor. That's got to be the dumbest bit of organising you've ever seen in your life. But anyway, everybody knew that Hitler was going to want to do something about that corridor and bring East Prussia, as it was called, back into the territorial integrity of Germany, and that was now that Polish corridor was never part of Poland. So the idea again that this was some sort of just and reasonable way of partitioning, it was done to weaken Germany and to show Germany, hey, we're the boss. We decide what the borders are around here. And Hitler wanted to bring, understandably, by the way, wanted to bring East Prussia, remove that Polish corridor. So Hitler wanted to enter into negotiations with Poland that would have, found some diplomatic way of resolving that. The Polish government, under duress from Britain and France, told Hitler to go and get lost. And so Hitler took the military option in September 1939 and invaded Poland. Now, this idea that Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister before Churchill, had negotiated peace in our time and this sort of thing, he said to this is, I'm paraphrasing here, but in 1938 in the Munich Agreement, Chamberlain and the French Premier had said, look, to Hitler, do you have any other territorial claims in Europe? Now, if you look at the wording and sort of consider it carefully, and Hitler was maybe too clever by half here, but if you look at the wording carefully of that agreement, do you have any territorial claims outside of Germany? And Hitler didn't, but he did want, East Prussia and the Polish corridor were German territory as far as Hitler was concerned, which it was, by the way. And so if you take the sort of the wordplay interpretation of things, Hitler wasn't breaking that Munich agreement. But again, you can sort of play around with the wording on that. Chamberlain figured he'd got Hitler cornered, saying, okay, well, if he asks or tries to take or get any other territory in Europe, we now have a trigger to go to war. And that trigger, the threat of war, was meant to be enough to deter Hitler from taking any military action or going outside of the bounds of diplomatic negotiation. So when Hitler ordered the attack on Poland to again remove the Polish corridor and restore East Prussia, that was then the trigger for going to war. But did Britain give a shit about Poland? Well, of course not. Nor did France, for that matter. The issue here was not allowing Germany to become too powerful again, and there was a lot of concern in Britain, in various quarters. Winston Churchill sort of talking about it, saying, "Look, the German economy is getting more powerful." Germany, by the end of 1938, Germany was the richest economy in Europe, past Britain and France. They're starting to build up their military and so on and so forth. So this was considered, oh wow, we've got to stop these guys, and this was the trigger for going to war in 1939. The things, well, we're only protecting Poland. I mean, we're just protecting, and so they brought out all this propaganda of, Polish cavalry charging tanks and this, this sort of absolute propaganda nonsense to try and sort of portray this big bad Germany, poor little Poland. Poland was a very militaristic, belligerent nation. Who would go to war with anybody if they thought they could grab a bit of territory. So this idea that it was poor little Poland, big bad Germany was bullshit. But nonetheless, that was now when we look at any war that's being under, unless it's a war of defence, any war that's being undertaken, then and often the wars of defence have been provoked because that then gives the moral high ground to the supposed. Well, they attacked us. It's not, we didn't do it. It's them. But the reality is that the other side may have been constantly provoked and antagonized, threatened and cajoled and so on until they did take military action. And but coming back to this idea of the stated reason and the actual reason, again, the protection of Belgium or the support of Poland were never the real reasons. The real reasons were the wider realpolitik of the time and the power politics and the power dynamics, economics and these sort of things. Those guys are getting way too influential, way too powerful. We have to stop them now because we won't be able to stop them in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So this is very much a reasoning that the British were applying in going to war on both those times, and by the way, on other times. Now, if you look at the sort of wars that have been engaged in all the time, there's the moral reasoning and there's the actual reasoning, and that always needs to be kept in mind. Now, if we look at, say, the current Russian-Ukraine war, a very unnecessary war, vast amounts of blood and treasure being expended for absolutely no reason, no achievement, nothing's being accomplished here. But the NATO and the West, the United States, aggressively, I believe, aggressively provoked Putin, constantly provoked him wherever he produced sort of a red line. Don't cross this line, otherwise I'm going to get really upset here. Then they would cross that line like children, testing a parent or something, or a teacher. It was really sad to watch the purposeful provocations that were put in, and then once Putin does take action, look at the bully, no. Taking away Ukraine's democratically elected government and replacing with a globalist stooge government, and all this sort of stuff going on, and trying to claim their moral high ground. Well, we're only fighting back against the bully. No, you're not. So we always need to look at reasoning for wars and say, well, what the moral reason that's been put forward and then the actual reasons are very different. And the moral reasoning may sound good. Politicians run around acting tough, but this sort of rationale is used for, why are we clamping down on straight white men? Well, we have to because they're all Nazis. They're Nazis. Look at the Nazis. Swastikas. Oh, look at them. They're oppressing women. They're Nazis. We have to put them in their place. This is all faux outrage, all invented. It's nothing to do with any form of reality. The decision is made to go to war against straight white men in the West by Western governments. But the justification is, well, they're all rapists. They're all beating their wives. They're all evil fascists. They're all far right. This is all the cosmetic. This is all the window dressing to justify power political decisions that have been made in the back room, the previous day. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.